Four British Christians who claim they lost their jobs as a result of discrimination against their beliefs are taking their cases to the European Court of Human Rights. They include an airline worker stopped from wearing a cross and a registrar who refused to conduct civil partnerships for same-sex couples. All four lost separate employment tribunals relating to their beliefs. Let's discuss this further with Simon Calvert of the Christian Institute and Keith Porteous-Wood, Executive Director of the National Secular Society. We're not going to have a ruling on this, Keith, are we, for some time, but how do you answer the argument that people like you are driving faith out of society?
I think it's the opposite. I think that if these cases are successful, that it will create a hierarchy of rights with religion at the top. And I think that's potentially quite disastrous, particularly as far as employers and gay people are concerned. And if these cases are successful, it will actually be giving sanction to discrimination against gay people, which will undermine their sense of worth, indeed their dignity, and even their position as being 100% members of society.
And that is the argument of Lord Leicester QC, isn't it? The human rights QC who advises you, I think.
No, he was the author of the intervention that we made to the European Court.
Precisely. So I recognise the arguments. And Simon Calvert, I mean, his other argument is that people can resign if they want to.
Well, which isn't really a terribly tolerant situation, is it? I mean, let's be honest, everybody has strong views, convictions about a range of things. They may be religious-based, they might not. But anybody who cares about freedom of conscience should want these people to win their cases. It's because there is, I think, a hierarchy of rights at the moment, and religion's at the bottom. And freedom of conscience is at the bottom, and we don't want that. I mean, the Christian Institute is only involved in the case of Lillian Ladele. If she succeeds, it will have no impact whatsoever on the service provision received by gay people. All it will do is create a little bit of space for Lillian and people like her to be able to keep their jobs and keep their conscience too.
And what is wrong with that, Keith?
Well, I think it's an analogous situation if we go to Rosa Parks, the woman who didn't get off, wouldn't go to the back of the bus. If it had been possible...
Rosa Parks in the Civil Rights Movement.
In the Civil Rights Movement
America,
in Montgomery, Alabama. And if it had been the case that there had been another bus company that would have provided a service without discrimination, then using this very same argument, then she wouldn't have had any basis for argument.
No, I think the analogy falls apart completely because, of course, people going to Islington to obtain the civil partnership ceremonies would perceive no difference whatsoever. They would never know that there in the background, out of all the dozens of registrars, there was one who took a different view of conscience. That would be invisible to them.
Well, I think both in Islington, which is probably the borough with the highest proportion of gay people in the country, and Relate, the other gay case, who are involved in marriage counselling and gay counselling, I think they take their equal opportunities very, very seriously, and those equal opportunities are fundamental to their perception in their own market.
But then something like the former Bishop of Rochester would argue that this is a new form of totalitarianism creeping into public life, where in fact, you know, you've got to go with the groupthink here, and actually people who have their own particular religious views are being squeezed out.
Well, I think the attitudes to race and homosexuality have actually become very, very much more civilised as a result of the declaratory human rights and equality legislation that we've had over the past 20 years, and I welcome that.
And is there a homophobic element to this, Simon?
No, I don't think that's fair at all. As I've said, the impact of Lillian Ladele's case, it would have no impact on same-sex couples at all. It would simply mean that Christians are able to live according to their consciences in the workplace. And, you know, anyone can imagine themselves in a situation where, because of a set of convictions they've got, there might be one aspect, small aspect of their job, that if they were forced to do it, they would go against their conscience. And good employers work around that where they can. Islington proved they could work around it for Lillian, so what was the problem?
And that could apply just as much to you, with your views,
but they could
as it would to somebody who's a committed Christian.
Indeed, but I think they can do exactly what they want in private and manifest their religion, but when it's in the public sphere and in the commercial sphere, then I think the rules change. And indeed, when we're talking about registrars. They're actually acting for the state, and the court has already said there it's an even higher standard that they must treat all citizens with equal dignity.
And they've lost all the cases in this country. I mean, how concerned are you if it does go against them here at the European Court? I mean, what would your position then be?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to prophesy doom, but it is a serious situation. It's rather embarrassing for the British government to have all these Christians lining up saying, look, we have lost out on basic freedoms here. Christians will just have to continue just trying to explain their positions and just trying to push for that little bit of space where they can continue to operate according to their consciences. It happens in all kinds of other areas of life in this country. Why can't it apply to Christians too?
Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute and Keith Porteous from the National Secular Society. Thank you very much indeed, both of you.